The River's Whisper, The Story of Naya. Prologue, A River's Tale. Long before the village of Ekwuru was established, the Onyo River flowed freely, untamed and mysterious. Legends spoke of how the river was not just water, but a living, breathing spirit, an ancient guardian tasked with protecting the balance between land and water. It was said that those chosen by the river could harness its power, but with great power came even greater responsibility. The river's guardians were rare, appearing only in times of great need. They were often born under extraordinary circumstances marked by the river itself. Some were hailed as heroes, others were feared and misunderstood. This duality mirrored the river's own nature, life-giving yet capable of destruction. Ekwuru's elders often recounted tales of the river's wrath, of floods that swallowed entire villages when its spirit was angered. These stories, passed down through generations, shaped the villagers' reverence and fear of the Onyo. The river was not just a part of their lives, it was their lifeblood, their protector, and their judge. But with time, the true meaning of the river's whispers faded, replaced by superstition and fear. It was into this world, bound by tradition and ignorance, that Naya was born. Chapter 1. A Cursed Birth. The night Naya was born, the sky was an inky black, with no moon or stars to illuminate the village of Ekwuru. A storm raged, the winds howling as if the heavens themselves mourned. In a small hut by the riverbank, Adana, a healer known for her gentle touch, fought for her life as she brought her child into the world. The midwives, seasoned women who had delivered countless babies, exchanged nervous glances. The labour was long and arduous, and Adana's cries pierced the storm like a warning. When the baby finally emerged, a healthy girl with bright, curious eyes, there was no joy, only silence. Moments later, Adana took her final breath, her hand falling limp. The chief midwife, Mama Ezine, whispered a prayer, her hands trembling as she wrapped the baby in cloth. "The river has claimed her," she murmured. "This child, she is cursed." Word spread quickly. By dawn, the entire village had gathered outside Obi's home, their faces shadowed with fear and suspicion. Obi, a fisherman who had loved Adana deeply, stood at the threshold, his newborn daughter cradled in his arms. "The river is angry," the chief priest declared, his voice booming. "This child's birth has upset the balance. She must be returned to the waters to appease the spirit." Obi's grief turned to rage. "You will not take my daughter," he shouted, his voice defiant. "She is innocent. If the river is angry, it is not because of her." The villagers recoiled at his words, shocked by his audacity, but no one dared challenge him further. They retreated, whispering among themselves. From that day on, Obi and Naya were outcasts, their lives marked by the shadow of superstition. Chapter 2. Childhood Shadows. Naya's early years were a mix of love and loneliness. Her father, despite his heartbreak, poured all his love into raising her. He taught her to fish, to weave baskets, and to find beauty in the world, even when it seemed to reject her. But the villagers were less forgiving. Children ran from her, their laughter turning to shrieks of fear when she approached. Adults whispered behind her back, their words sharp and cutting. "She's cursed," they said. "She'll bring ruin to us all." Despite the hostility, Naya found solace in the river. She would sit for hours by its banks, her feet dangling in the cool water. She spoke to it as if it were a friend, sharing her fears and dreams. Sometimes she thought she heard it whisper back, its voice soft and soothing. One day, when she was 7, something extraordinary happened. While fishing with her father, Naya leaned over the edge of their small canoe to touch the water. As her fingers grazed the surface, the river seemed to respond, swirling around her hand in shimmering patterns. Fish leapt from the water, their scales glinting like silver. Obi saw the wonder in her eyes and smiled. "The river knows you," he said. "Perhaps it sees what others cannot." But Naya wasn't sure. The whispers of the villagers weighed heavily on her, and she often wondered if she truly was the source of their misfortunes. Obi saw the wonder in her eyes and smiled. "The river knows you," he said. "Perhaps it sees what others cannot." But Naya wasn't sure. The whispers of the villagers weighed heavily on her, and she often wondered if she truly was the source of their misfortunes. Chapter 3. The Stranger by the Road. When Naya was 10, an encounter changed her life forever. It was a hot afternoon and the sun blazed overhead as she walked home from the river, a clay jug balanced on her head. The path was deserted, the air thick with the hum of cicadas. As she rounded a bend, she saw an old woman lying by the roadside. Her leg was covered in deep gashes, the wound oozing blood. Flies buzzed around her and her face was pale with pain. "Help me," the woman rasped, her voice barely audible. Naya hesitated. Fear prickled her skin and she glanced around, hoping someone else would appear. But there was no one. Taking a deep breath, she knelt beside the woman and poured water from her jug over the wound. As the water touched the old woman's leg, it began to glow faintly. The gashes closed before Naya's eyes, leaving smooth, unblemished skin. She gasped, pulling back in shock. The woman sat up, her eyes wide with gratitude and something else, recognition. "You carry the mark," she said, her voice strong now. "What mark?" Naya asked, her heart racing. The woman shook her head. "You'll understand in time. The river has chosen you." Before Naya could ask more, the woman disappeared into the forest, leaving her alone with questions she couldn't begin to answer. Chapter 4. Loss and Revelation. When Naya turned 14, tragedy struck again. Her father, who had been her rock, fell gravely ill. Despite her best efforts, he passed away one quiet evening, his last words a plea for her to stay strong. With Obi gone, Naya was left utterly alone. The villagers, who had always kept their distance, now openly shunned her. They refused to buy her baskets or offer her work, forcing her to rely on scraps and the kindness of strangers. Eventually, she was sent to live with her aunt Ifeoma, a reclusive woman who lived on the outskirts of the village. Ifeoma's hut was small and cluttered, filled with strange objects, jars of herbs, carved wooden masks, and bottles of glowing liquid. She rarely spoke, her eyes sharp and watchful. At first, Naya was too grief-stricken to question her aunt's oddities. But as weeks turned into months, her curiosity grew. Why did Ifeoma avoid the villagers? What were the symbols carved into her walls? And why did she always return from the river at night, her clothes damp and her face solemn? One night, unable to contain her curiosity, Naya decided to follow her aunt. She trailed her through the forest, careful to stay hidden. When they reached the river, Naya watched in disbelief as Ifeoma waded into the water and transformed. Her legs fused into a shimmering tail, and she disappeared beneath the surface. Chapter 5. The Call of the River. Naya's heart pounded as Ifeoma's shimmering tail disappeared beneath the river's surface. Her legs felt frozen, her mind reeling. How could her quiet, enigmatic aunt be something other than human? Before she could retreat, the water began to ripple violently, and a column of light shot upward from the river's depths. Naya gasped as Ifeoma emerged, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "I know you're there, child," she said, her voice calm but firm. Trembling, Naya stepped out of the shadows. "What are you?" she whispered. Ifeoma's expression softened. "Not what, Naya? Who? And now you must know the truth." Without another word, she held out her hand. Despite her fear, Naya took it. The moment their fingers touched, Naya felt an overwhelming pull, as though the river itself was drawing her in. She gasped for air as water surrounded her, but instead of drowning, she felt a strange sense of peace. The current carried her into a vast underwater cavern illuminated by an ethereal glow. The cavern was alive with beings that defied logic, creatures with tails like fish, but torsos like humans, their features both alien and familiar. They regarded Naya with curiosity, their whispers echoing through the water. "Naya," Ipheoma began, "this is your heritage. Your mother, Adana, was one of us, a guardian of the river. She gave up her life in the water to live on land, but her blood flows in you. That is why the river called to you." Naya shook her head, disbelief clouding her thoughts. "But I'm just a girl, a cursed girl. The villagers fear what they do not understand," Ipheoma interrupted. "You are not cursed, Naya. You are chosen. The river marked you at birth, and now it is time for you to embrace your destiny." Before Naya could respond, an elder mermaid with a crown of coral stepped forward. "You carry the mark of the river's guardian," she said, "but the choice is yours. You can leave now and return to the surface, or you can stay and fulfill your purpose." Chapter 6. A Guardian's Trial. Becoming a guardian of the river was not as simple as Naya had imagined. The elders began her training immediately, teaching her to harness the river's power. She learned to command the currents, to heal with water, and to listen to the river's whispers. But the lessons were grueling. Every mistake brought consequences, and Naya often doubted herself. One day during a training session, she failed to control a surge of water, and the cavern flooded. Though no one was harmed, the elder scolded her harshly. "You carry great power, Naya," the elder said, "but power without control is dangerous. If you cannot master it, you will bring harm to those you wish to protect." The words stung, but they also ignited a determination in Naya. She threw herself into her training, spending hours practicing until she could control the water with precision. Her connection to the river deepened, and she began to understand its language. The whispers she had heard as a child were now clear voices, guiding her and revealing the river's secrets. But as she grew stronger, she also began to feel the river's pain. The water was poisoned in some areas, the fish fewer and weaker. The river spirit was weakening, and Naya knew she had to act. Chapter 7. The Village in Turmoil. While Naya trained beneath the river, the village of Ekwuru faced its own struggles. Crops failed, the fish became scarce, and a strange illness swept through the villagers. They turned to the chief priest for answers, and he declared that Naya's curse was to blame. "The girl must be found and sacrificed," he proclaimed. "Only then will the river be appeased." The villagers, desperate and afraid, began searching for Naya. They scoured the riverbank and interrogated Ipheoma, who feigned ignorance of her niece's whereabouts. In the palace, the king grew increasingly worried. His son, Prince Emeka, had fallen ill with the mysterious sickness, and none of the healers could cure him. The king, a pragmatic man, began to question the chief priest's claims. "What if the girl is not cursed?" he asked. "What if she is the key to saving us?" But the chief priest, fearing his own power would be undermined, dismissed the king's concerns. "You risk angering the gods, my king," he warned. Chapter 8. The Return. Naya, now fully trained, felt the river's call urging her to return to the surface. The elders warned her of the dangers, but she was determined to help her people, even if they hated her. When she emerged from the water, the villagers recoiled in fear. Her shimmering tail and glowing eyes confirmed their worst fears. But before they could act, the king arrived with his guards. "You will not harm her," he commanded. "She will save my son." The chief priest protested, but the king silenced him with a glare. Naya was brought to the palace, where she found Prince Emeka barely clinging to life. She knelt beside him, placing her hands on his chest. "River, guide me," she whispered. As she chanted the ancient words she had learned in the cavern, water flowed from her hands, glowing with a soft light. Moments later, the prince opened his eyes, his strength restored. Gasps filled the room, and the king fell to his knees before Naya. "You have saved my son," he said. "We were wrong to fear you." Chapter 9. A new beginning. Word of Naya's powers spread quickly, and the villagers began to see her in a new light. She used her abilities to heal the sick, purify the water, and restore the river's balance. The chief priest, exposed as a fraud, was banished, and the king declared Naya the guardian of the river. The villagers, once blinded by superstition, now revered her as their protector. Though she straddled two worlds, land and water, Naya found peace in her dual identity. She became a bridge between the villagers and the river, ensuring harmony for generations to come. Her story became a legend, a reminder that even those cast out can rise above fear and ignorance to become heroes.